Margaret smoothed down her worn canvas jacket as she stood outside the cafe window. At 58, she'd learned that life rarely went according to plan. Her daughter Emma had insisted on setting up this blind date, practically begging her to give love another chance after all these years alone. "Mom, you deserve happiness," Emma had said just that morning. "Mr. Harrison is a good man. Just meet him. That's all I ask." Margaret glanced at her reflection in the glass. Her light brown hair, touched with silver at the temples, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, just the face she'd earned through decades of hard work and harder lessons. Her canvas backpack, patched in 2 places, hung from her shoulder. The jeans were faded but clean. The jacket had seen better days. She almost turned around and went home, but something made her push open that door. Maybe it was the memory of Emma's hopeful eyes. Maybe it was the small wrapped gift in her hands. Homemade cookies, nothing fancy, just something her grandmother had taught her to bake 60 years ago. The cafe smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Warm light spilled across wooden tables. And there he was. Robert Harrison sat by the window, exactly where Emma said he'd be. He wore a charcoal suit that spoke of boardrooms and important decisions. His dark hair was styled perfectly, touched with distinguished gray at the sides. An expensive watch caught the light as he lifted his coffee cup. Everything about him said success, refinement, the kind of life Margaret had never known. She felt her courage falter. What was she doing here? They were from different worlds, but Robert looked up then, and his eyes met hers. He didn't look away. He didn't frown at her simple clothes or worn backpack. Instead, he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and softened the formal lines of his face. "Margaret?" he asked, standing. His voice was gentle, warm. "Yes," she managed. "I'm sorry I'm not—" "I didn't dress up. I came straight from my shift at the library. Please, sit down," he said, and something in his tone made her relax just a little. "I'm glad you came." She set the small wrapped package on the table between them. "I brought you something. It's nothing much, just, well, I believe in bringing something when you meet someone new. It's how I was raised." Robert looked at the modest gift with an expression she couldn't quite read. He carefully untied the twine, not ripping it, but treating it with care. Inside were her grandmother's oatmeal cookies wrapped in simple wax paper. "You made these?" he asked quietly. "This morning." "My grandmother's recipe." She always said that store-bought cookies were fine, but homemade ones, they carried a piece of your heart. Robert was silent for a moment. Then he picked up a cookie and took a bite. Margaret watched his face, expecting polite tolerance. Instead, she saw his eyes close briefly, and when he opened them, they were bright with something that looked almost like tears. "My mother used to make cookies like these," he said softly, "every Sunday morning. I haven't tasted anything like them in 30 years since she passed." They sat there in the warm cafe as the afternoon light grew golden, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Margaret told him about the library where she'd worked for 23 years, about the children who came in for story time, about the elderly patrons she'd helped navigate computers and find large print books. She told him about Emma, her daughter, raised alone after her husband had left when Emma was just 3. "It wasn't easy," Margaret said simply. "There were years I worked 2 jobs. Years I couldn't afford Christmas presents and had to make things by hand. But Emma turned out kind. That's all that mattered to me." Robert listened. Really listened. Not with the impatient politeness of someone waiting for their turn to talk, but with the full attention that had become so rare in the world. Then he told his story. "I built my company from nothing," he said. "Worked 80-hour weeks for 20 years. I thought success meant the biggest house, the fastest car, the most impressive portfolio. I married someone who wanted the same things. We lived in a mansion and barely spoke to each other. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago." He looked down at his expensive watch. "I have everything money can buy, Margaret. And I come home every night to silence. My son calls twice a year, on my birthday and Christmas. Duty calls. We don't know each other anymore." "That must be lonely," Margaret said. "It is." They ordered more coffee. The cafe grew busier around them, but they barely noticed. Robert asked about her grandmother's cookie recipe, and Margaret found herself sharing memories she hadn't spoken of in years. Her grandmother's small kitchen, the wooden spoon she'd used to teach Margaret to stir just right, the way flour would dust the old woman's hands like snow. She had very little money, Margaret said, but she was rich in ways that mattered. She knew everyone's name in the neighborhood. She sat with people when they were sick. She taught me that kindness costs nothing but means everything. As the sky outside darkened toward evening, Robert said something that surprised her. When my assistant showed me your profile for this blind date, I'll be honest, I almost canceled. You weren't what I thought I was looking for. No prestigious career, no sophisticated lifestyle. I'm ashamed to admit I almost let those surface things matter. Margaret felt her cheeks warm. But Robert continued quickly. But my daughter, she's the one who really set this up. Worked with your Emma. She said something to me. She said, Dad, you need to meet someone who knows what matters. Someone who built a real life, not just a successful one. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Margaret's hand. In 3 hours, you've shown me more genuine warmth than I've experienced in 30 years of business dinners and country club events. You brought me homemade cookies. Do you know how profound that is? You barely knew me, and you gave me something made with your own hands, your own time. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. It's how I was raised. You treat people with kindness. You give what you can. That's everything, Robert said quietly. That's what I've been missing. Not more success, not more money, but someone who understands that the best things in life are the ones you can't buy. A homemade cookie, a real conversation. Someone who sees you, not your bank account. They left the cafe together as the streetlights came on. Outside, Robert hesitated. Could we do this again? Maybe next week? I'd like to hear more of your grandmother's stories. And I'd like to tell you about my mother, if you wouldn't mind listening. Margaret smiled, a real smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. I'd like that very much. As she walked to the bus stop, her worn backpack on her shoulder and her heart lighter than it had been in years, Margaret thought about how life could surprise you. She hadn't dressed to impress. She hadn't pretended to be someone she wasn't. She'd just shown up as herself, simple, genuine, kind, and somehow, that had been everything he needed to see. Sometimes the best things we have to offer aren't the things we own. They're the things we've learned, the kindness we carry, the authenticity we bring to every encounter. Margaret had arrived at that blind date looking like she had nothing. But Robert had seen everything he'd spent a lifetime searching for. And in that warm cafe, over homemade cookies and honest conversation, two people who'd walked very different paths found something precious. A genuine connection, built not on appearances or possessions, but on the quiet truth that kindness and authenticity never go out of style. They were both old enough to know that was worth everything.